Welcome everybody to the Cover 2 podcast. I'm Nick Neenan.
I'm Jared Smith.
And this is a special edition of the Cover 2 podcast. First of all, a new start time. 9:15 today. Normally it's going to be 9 o'clock here on Wednesdays, pretty much for the rest of the fall and the winter. So new start time for anybody listening live. If you are listening on YouTube, this is a special because it is our NFL Predictions podcast.
Oh yeah,
we love doing this every single year. If I'm not mistaken, this was actually one of our first podcasts we ever did. It was an NFL Predictions podcast.
I believe so.
So, if you don't know what this is, we're predicting the entire NFL season. We go in-depth the entire show, minus a little bit of Do You Care in the middle, is going to be about the NFL season. So, Jared, might as well get started.
Let's do this.
We got an extra segment today because we needed so much time for this show. So, we're going to start with the NFC East and the NFC North. We'll start specifically with the NFC East. And Jared, how do you want to do this? Do you want to just go through the conference, or do you want to kind of go through each team?
Let's talk about each team. I mean, I want the fans and the listeners to come out of this being, pro NFL and veterans of the game and knowing players and what the team did last year, what teams are going to do this year, at least what we think teams are going to do this year. So I want to give them somewhat of an in-depth look at every single team as much as we can to see how they have improved or regressed from last year, and where we think they will end up at the end of this season.
Yeah, and so one of us might not comment as much on another team just because of time restrictions, but we will get you an in-depth thing on all 32 teams. Let's get started with the defending champions, Philadelphia Eagles. Obviously beating the New England Patriots last year. Jared, I'll let you take it away. This is a rival of your Dallas Cowboys. Take it away. What do you think about them going into the 2018 season?
Yeah, this team is undoubtedly loaded at almost every single position. Listen, when you're the Super Bowl champions, you're going to have turnover, and you're not going to be able to re-sign every single player from last year. But the main cog, the main key players are still on this roster. The biggest question for this team, obviously, is when will Carson Wentz come back to play? Right? He just started practicing in 11-on-11s, which means a full team practice now. He still has a brace on, but he's not completely cleared for live contact, which means he hasn't played in a regular season game since he got injured last December against the Rams. So Nick Foles this offseason has not looked great. He has looked okay at best, but I want to put an asterisk by that because it's not like they've had their full complement of first-team players out there with Nick Foles. Whether it's been resting players or injuries, Nick Foles has been out there in this preseason playing with a mix of starters and backup players. So I'm not going to sit here and completely say that Nick Foles has fallen off the ledge or that he can't get the job done, because clearly he did last season when he led this team to the Super Bowl in the playoffs. But my concern for this team is, can Nick Foles do this for an entire season? I do not know. I think at this point in Nick Foles' career, we kind of know what he can be. He is a kind of lower-end starting quarterback in this league, more so a very good backup, in my opinion. And what I mean by that is I think he can come in and spell a team like he did last year for a period of games, 3, 4, 5 games. But I think if you're relying on Nick Foles for an entire season to get you back to the promised land, I'm not so sure that he can do it for a full year.
Yeah, no, it's going to be interesting at the beginning of the season for the Eagles because I don't believe Carson Wentz is going to be ready at the very beginning of the season. I think it will take a while for him to get fully healthy and fully back. And I think the Eagles are okay with starting Nick Foles. But like you said, he hasn't looked good in the preseason. The wide receivers are banged up at the beginning of the season. The running backs are still good. And his offensive line is solid. So he's going to be able to be a pretty good quarterback. I think with the Eagles, without Wentz, they are potentially a playoff team, but they're probably not a Super Bowl team. And I get that probably doesn't make any sense since Foles won the Super Bowl last year. But sometimes you get lucky when a guy gets hurt. And like you said, Foles took them enough games. The defense was unbelievable. The compliments around Nick Foles helped him out as well. He played great in the Super Bowl. But I think I agree with you. I don't think Foles can do it an entire season. They still could make the playoffs with a guy like Nick Foles because their roster is talented, but they're going to need Carson Wentz back in order for me to say they're going to win the NFC East division.
Right. And some of the biggest additions for this team a lot of times will say, oh, it's a guy that they signed in the offseason or a guy that they drafted with a high draft pick. For me, I think the biggest additions for this team is getting Carson Wentz and Darren Sproles back.
Yeah,
you get Carson Wentz, one of the best quarterbacks in the league, right? A franchise guy. And you get Darren Sproles, the kind of dude all around running back, punt returner, kick returner. I think you get those two veteran guys back, and this team has a chance to get back to the Super Bowl. So other than that, there's not that many holes on this team. The one thing I will say, in this NFC East division, there has not been a back-to-back division winner since 2003, 2004.
Yeah.
And it was the Eagles who did it, but it's been a good 15 years since there's been back-to-back winners. So, odds are there will be a new division champ in the NFC East this year.
Absolutely. All right, let's switch teams. Let's get to your Cowboys, Jared. You're wearing the colors. I don't know if you did that on purpose, but at least you're wearing a shirt.
A little bit.
A little bit. Yeah, you tend to do that. But so I'll actually start out with the Cowboys just because I'll just start with the Cowboys. But so this team is interesting going into the season because obviously they were so good 2 years ago, and then they got Zeke suspended and all that BS that happened last year. So that year was kind of thrown away. Going into this year, it was like, okay, the Cowboys are probably going to have a resurgence. They're probably going to be back. Problem is the offensive line is getting torn apart. I mean, guys dropping like flies left and right. And that's going to be a big thing for the Cowboys because that's been one of the reasons their offense has been so great. Along with Zeke and Dak, you had an offensive line that was able to open these giant holes for Ezekiel Elliott. If you don't have a star offensive line, it's going to be harder for him. The receiving core is definitely not as good. The tight ends are essentially non-existent for the Cowboys. The defense is still pretty good, and especially the defensive line, and it's one of the best defensive lines in the NFL. But it's interesting. I don't really know how this Cowboys team is going to play because, number one, Dak and Zeke really haven't played in the preseason and stuff like that as much either. So I'm interested to see how healthy this offensive line can get. If they're healthy, this Cowboys team is potentially a playoff team. If not, I think it's going to be difficult. It's going to end up a lot like last year.
I was extremely excited going into this offseason for the Dallas Cowboys, looking at their entire roster. Now, obviously, the tight end position is a weak point, losing Jason Witten, right? Not many people saw Jason Witten retiring. It was kind of in the works that he was going to be on his last couple years. But I think ESPN just offered him too good of a contract, and he said, listen, I want to go out on my own terms, so I can't fault Jason Witten for retiring at all. Good for him. The other surprising move for the Cowboys was releasing Dez Bryant, the all-time touchdowns leader for the franchise. And that was a shocking move, not necessarily for releasing Dez Bryant, but who was going to replace him. They signed Allen Hurns from Jacksonville, who's a good receiver, and he kind of has the same build, more of a big-body guy, not a speed burner, but a guy that can go up and make contested catches and that type of thing. But still, in my opinion, I think Dez Bryant is better. Anyways, he's gone. He's not coming back. So the three things for the Cowboys right now, who is going to be the receiving threat that Dak can rely on? Is this defense going to be able to hold up? Because I think this defense will be slightly underrated. Yeah, I don't think many people are thinking too much of them right now. But like you mentioned, their defensive line probably has the most talent that it's had since Jason Garrett has taken over as head coach. And like you mentioned, the most important thing, the offensive line. This team goes with the offense, right? And especially with the offensive line. If they run the ball, control the clock, and keep the other team's quarterback off the field, they have a very, very good chance of winning. Problem is, when your offensive line is banged up like they are, you have Travis Frederick, and I forget the exact disease that he is diagnosed with.
That's not just an injury.
Right. Yeah. This is more of a life, career thing going on with Frederick. So he will be out for the foreseeable future. There's probably a slight chance that he can come back during the year, but I would not bank on that. Mm-hmm. His backup, Joe Looney, has been with this organization for 3 or 4 years now, so he knows the offense. He's obviously not an all-pro like Frederick, but he can still get the job done. Zach Martin, 2 weeks ago in the second preseason game, got an injury scare where he hyperextended his knee. Now, he went back to practice yesterday on Tuesday, full practice, no knee brace, so that's a very, very good sign. He said he's playing week 1, which is fantastic news because the Cowboys need all the help they can get up there. Right tackle Lyle Collins injured his ankle with a sprain, but he said that's nothing serious and he will play as well. So the line is intact except for their center position. Listen, like I said, if they can control the ball, run it with Zeke, if Dak can find a consistent receiver to throw through, I think this team can be a playoff contender, right? If the line starts to fall apart and Dak has to throw the ball 40, 50 times a game, then unfortunately I think this team is going to lose some games. So, like I said, going into this offseason, I was very, very optimistic before the injuries, before Jason Witten retiring, before Des Bryant being released. So a lot of things have happened since then. I'm still banking on this team making the playoffs, and we'll see what happens from there.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting year for the Cowboys. A couple things have to happen. This won't be a bad team, but it just might not be a great team like they were 2 years ago. Let's move on. Last two teams in the NFC East are the Giants and Redskins. I'm going to start with the Redskins because at least I think they're the clear number 4 team in this division. And there's not much to talk about. They added Alex Smith. They lost Kirk Cousins. They have running back troubles right now. They had to sign Adrian Peterson off the street.
AP.
The defense is good to okay. And it's an average team in a tough division. I think there's 3 teams clearly better than them in this division, so they're going to have a lot of losses in the division. I don't see this team making the playoffs. Do you see anything different about this?
No, not at all. Team? This team is the 4th team in this division, clearly. Alex Smith is a game manager, and what will happen with this team offensively, I don't believe they will score as many points as they did last year with Kirk Cousins, because I believe Kirk Cousins is more of a gunslinger, but Alex Smith is not going to turn the ball over as much. So you kind of got to take it where you can get it. Would you prefer to have more points and then potentially a higher turnover rate, or less turnovers and more of a close competitive game every single week, which I think is going to happen with this team. Jay Gruden, I think he's kind of in the hot seat a little bit. All right, he obviously went to the playoffs with RG3 in their first year. Then RG3 obviously injured himself, and he's never been the same since. And ever since then, they've been trying to find that franchise quarterback. They were not able to get a long-term deal done with Kirk Cousins, which is why he's gone now. And enters Alex Smith, right? Their first-round pick, Darius Geis, like you mentioned, tore his ACL in the first preseason game against the Patriots. That was a huge blow for a team looking for major help from the running back spot. So then they signed AP. I mean, AP looks good right now, but it's also the beginning of the year, right? So we'll see what happens when we get into the middle of the season if he can still be an effective running back. And I don't see enough weapons on this team to contend in what I think is going to be a very tough NFC East.
Yeah, no, I don't see them making the playoffs this year, so we won't extend on them too much more. Good receiving core. I'll say the receiving core is underrated, but other than that, everything's pretty average. All right, let's move on to the Giants. I'll start for the Giants. They get Odell back, which is obviously the biggest thing for them. This team was uncharacteristically horrible last year. I mean, they win like 2 games or something like that last year. It wasn't very
3-13.
3-13, so that's close. But yeah, not very good. They had the Eli situation where they benched him and ruined his streak. McAdoo's gone. Now we have Pat Shurmur as the coach of the Giants. They draft Saquon Barkley. Odell also just got paid. So we'll
$95 million, $65 guaranteed.
Exactly. We probably would have extended on that more, but the podcast is more about every team and not just one. But yeah, Odell gets a big contract, so we'll see how he plays. For me, this team, if they can complement Odell, Eli, and Saquon Barkley on the offense, along with a tight end like Evan Ingram, and their defense can return to somewhat of their 2016 form, I think they're the division winners, to be honest. I think they win the division in the NFC East. It's not too crazy of a prediction since the Eagles went from worst to first last year. I'm not saying it because that happened. I'm just saying this Giants team is not going to be as bad as they were last year. I think the coaching is better, and I think with Odell back, and they actually have a running back, and a good running back in Saquon Barkley, I think this team, with the complement of the defense, could win the NFC East, and they're actually my pick to win the NFC East.
Wow, that's a pretty bold statement right there, going from worst to first.
Yeah.
But like I said, there's been no back-to-back division winners, so the Giants...
It has to be the Giants, Cowboys, the Redskins, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah. No, I think I'm going to say kind of the same thing that I said about this team at the beginning of last season. On paper, this team is loaded. If you look at the roster with drafting Saquon Barkley, obviously Odell Beckham, Sterling Shepard, right, Evan Ingram, the two-time Super Bowl winning champion Eli Manning. The offensive line got better. They signed left tackle Nate Soldier to protect Eli Manning's blind side. They drafted Will Hernandez, which is a bruising guard, out of UTEP. So the offensive line is better. They finally have a franchise running back. You get your franchise receiver. The defense, like you mentioned, if they can return to some type of form of 2016 when they were a top 5 defense, this team should be great, right? But then again, this is all what ifs, right? Mm-hmm. With injuries, and you never know how the team's going to play. So I'm holding my breath to say that this team is going to be division champs. Because if they stay healthy, they have a legit shot to do so. And it's one of the reasons why I think this is one of the tougher divisions in the NFL. You obviously have the Super Bowl winning champion Eagles. You have the Cowboys, who you can say I'm a homer or whatever, I don't care. In my opinion, if they are healthy, if they get that offensive line fixed, I think they're a playoff team as well. And this Giants team is definitely a playoff team. So, I think this is a very, very tough division. And I'm kind of scared of the Giants right now. But then again, I said that last year, and they tanked. So we'll see. Yeah, no,
it should be interesting with this NFC East division. I think all of these teams are pretty solid. But, like, there's not a Browns, or there's not a, I don't want to throw any teams under the bus. There's not a 49ers the last couple of years in this division. All of these teams can compete. All of them could beat each other. And it should be interesting to see who wins, because the Eagles have quarterback troubles with Foles and Wentz. We don't really know. Cowboys obviously have injury troubles. The Giants are unknown at this point because they were so bad last year. And then the Redskins obviously probably won't win the division. But should be interesting in the NFC East. Who was your pick, by the way, to win the NFC East, just real quick?
It's tough. I mean, if Carson Wentz comes back by week 3 or week 4, I have to say the Eagles right now. They're the defending Super Bowl champs. Exactly. I can't go against them. If Carson Wentz misses half the year, then I'm going to have to ride with my Cowboys.
There you go.
Yeah.
I got you.
So right now I'm going to save the Eagles if Wentz can come back early. If not, I'm giving my Cowboys a shot.
Exactly. We just said 3 different teams to win the division. So that's what we're talking about. All right, let's move on to the NFC North. A lot of interesting teams in this one. Not as good of a division as the NFC East, at least in my opinion. Let's start with the Bears. Mitch Trubisky in his second season. This team has gotten a little bit better in the offseason. They added a receiver in Allen Robinson. The offensive line is still a plus for this team. The defense is improved and I believe is underrated. But I don't know if this team can make the playoffs just because I just don't think they have enough talent. They're improved, but they're improved from being a bad team. So I don't know. And I don't really know what Mitch Trubisky has because he hasn't had a complement of great players around him recently. So I'm going to say the Bears don't make the playoffs this year, but I think they're trending up for sure.
This is very easy. The Bears are not making the playoffs. Right, Aaron Rodgers is back.
I was a little nicer.
Yeah, no. Aaron Rodgers is back for the Packers, and Minnesota is a very, very legit team that only got better. So I'm sorry, the Bears went 5-11 last year. I'm going to see them. I think they're going to have the same record, maybe 6-10.
What was their record last year?
5-11.
It's okay, yeah.
So I can see them going 6-10, maybe getting one more win. You're right. Mitchell Trubisky is a good quarterback. He's still developing. He's still growing going into his second year. New head coach Matt Nagy comes over from Kansas City where he was the offensive coordinator. So a new system for Trubisky. We'll see how well he can get on with that. I do like the addition of Allen Robinson. Hopefully Kevin White, the receiver that the team drafted first overall a couple years ago, can finally do something and stay healthy. You've got Jordan Howard, a very, very good running back. So you do have some pieces on offense, but I think it goes back to, can Trubisky, lead the team while still learning a new offense? I'm not so sure. Defensively, I think this defense is not that good. They did draft Roquan Smith, linebacker out of Georgia, one of my favorite players of the draft. Problem is, he didn't sign his rookie deal. He was the last rookie to sign his deal. He didn't come into camp until like the second week of camp, right? So he missed a lot of time. I don't care who you are, how many years you've been in the league. When you miss time in camp, that's not a good thing, especially if you're a rookie. So I think more so because of the Vikings and the Packers, I don't see this team winning. But I do see them improving from last year and getting maybe 1 or 2 more wins.
Definitely. No, you mentioned those 2 teams above in the division. That's probably 4 losses for the Bears. Let's move on to the Lions. This team, much unchanged besides the head coaching position. Matt Patricia, the former defensive coordinator in the sweatshirt for the New England Patriots, if you don't know who he is. Yeah, I don't know about this. This team just does not surround Matthew Stafford with a good offensive line. They don't surround him with enough star talent ever since Calvin Johnson has left. The running back game has always been iffy for them. I just see this team again being like an 8-8, 8-8, 9-7 team. It's going to be very difficult for them to make the playoffs in the better division in football, the NFC.
I think this is the worst team in this division.
Okay.
They went 9-7 last year, and that was because of Matthew Stafford. Mm-hmm. I think he's a great regular season quarterback. In the postseason, he's 0-3, so he's yet to get it done there. But in the regular season, I think he's like a Kirk Cousins, where I think he's going to throw the ball around. He's going to be able to make plays. He'll throw for 400 yards, 3 or 4 touchdowns a game. He'll throw some interceptions, but he can get the job done, right? He can keep a team in the game. Problem is, I think their defense is horrible. Other than Darius Slay,
It's not very good, yeah.
And their linebacker Davis, who was a rookie last year, who played really well for them, and Ziggy Ansah, they have 3 players on defense that I can name. I can't really name anyone else on their defense. Period. I think their defense is sorely lacking in talent, and in a division where you have now Aaron Rodgers and Kirk Cousins, I think that is going to hurt them tremendously. So I put them 4th behind the Bears. I don't think this team has any chance at making the playoffs whatsoever.
Yeah, you got to make additions, and the Lions seem to never do that. They just seem to stay with the same team and never improve, and it's like they've been on this Calvin Johnson hangover for a while. Not much to say about the Lions, and that's why we're going to move on. All right, last 2 teams in the division. I think we can both agree these are clearly the best 2 teams in this division. The Minnesota Vikings, who won the NFC North last season, and the Green Bay Packers. I will start. I think the Vikings are potentially the best team in the NFL this season.
Wow. The NFL, not even just this division.
No, in the NFL, yeah. Because I think the NFC is the better division anyway, so I think if they're the best team in the NFC, I will say the Patriots are always there, so it's hard to say that, but with the addition of Kirk Cousins, who I believe is better than Bradford and Keenum, getting back Dalvin Cook, and this defense being just loaded. I mean, every single position is a great player. I wrote this down. Not many holes in the team. If you're looking at a team to potentially bet on to win the Super Bowl, this might be the one. I think the NFC North, I'm going to give them the crown. Now, moving on to the Packers real quick, I got to talk about both at the same time. Packers have Aaron Rodgers, so they always have a chance. They add Jimmy Graham. Problem is, the defense is so average for Green Bay. It's just not good. And I think this is going to affect Green Bay in some games. I think the offensive line has continually been pretty average and hasn't improved. So, I don't know. I think it's going to be pretty difficult, actually, for this team to make the playoffs, even with Aaron Rodgers. And we've seen the last couple of years without Aaron Rodgers that this team is non-existent in the playoff picture.
Minnesota is my team to come out of this division. Obviously, Aaron Rodgers is the best quarterback in this division by far. But I think Minnesota has so much more talent on both sides of the ball, offensively and defensively. They led the NFL in total defense last year, and then they just signed George Iocca.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
The safety who was let go by the Bengals last week, because they need more safety help, because they already have Harrison Smith, who's fantastic. You have Xavier Rhodes, Trey Waynes, Daniil Hunter, Griffin, Anthony Barr. I mean, Kendricks. I can continue to go on and on about this defense. They are loaded. Plus, they have Mike Zimmer, who's a defensive coach, right? They want to run the ball, control the clock, and kick somebody's butt, which they're going to do. They get Dalvin Cook. They're a great running back returning from injury last year. And like we already mentioned, they signed Kirk Cousins. So they're going to be able to put up more points than they did last year with Case Keenum, who had a really, really good year. So I'm giving this division to the Vikings. I think the Green Bay Packers will be on that playoff bubble. Aaron Rodgers by himself can lead a team to the playoffs. The problem is, like you mentioned, and I agree with you, I don't think their defense is good enough to sustain for an entire year.
Yeah, no, it's not.
Their secondary, for some reason, just always gets injured for like the last 3 or 4 years. Like, I don't know what they do, defensive drills. I don't know how they practice, how they stretch. Like, whatever they're doing, they need to completely change it for their secondary. They did draft, who did they draft? They drafted Jair Alexander and Josh Jackson, 2 cornerbacks with their first 2 picks.
Oh, there you go.
So they obviously knew there was an issue in the secondary that they're trying to help solve. The problem is these guys are still rookies. So it's going to take them a little while to kind of come along. So, yeah, I think this team will be on that playoff bubble. If Aaron Rodgers can stay healthy, I'm not going to bet against him as far as getting into the playoffs. But after that, I'm not so sure about this.
Yeah,
team.
Vikings are the quote unquote bell cow of this division. I think if I had to pick one of the divisions in the NFC for one playoff team to come out of, I think it's going to be this one. Last couple of years, it's been interesting with the Packers, but Packers just seem to be degressing rather than improving at this point. And with Rodgers coming up with a contract soon, we'll see what ends up happening. All right, so we'll move on. We're going to go to break, a short little break, and then we will come back with the NFC South and NFC West. This is the Cover 2 podcast on OC Rock Radio.
Aaron Donald and the Rams closing in on a much-anticipated deal that would end his holdout and finally get him into camp. According to reports, the deal would make him the highest-paid defensive player in the history of the NFL. Aaron Donald is the reigning Defensive Player of the Year.
The New Orleans Saints have moved all the way up to the 14th overall pick.
The Green Bay Packers have traded the 14th pick to the New Orleans Saints. With the 14th pick in the 2018 NFL Draft, the New Orleans Saints select Marcus Davenport, defensive end, Texas San Antonio.
Welcome back to the Cover 2 podcast, continuing our NFL season predictions.
Yes.
I love it. We are going to keep going with the NFC South, where 3 of the 4 teams in this division made the playoffs last year. A very, very strong division as the Saints, Panthers, and Falcons all made it to the playoffs. A very, very tough division. Let's start, though, with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who Nick and I both believe, because of suspensions and just lack of talent, are not going to make this team. So let's get the Buccaneers started first.
Yeah, I mean, the Bucs, they're just not that good, and they haven't been good since essentially Gruden won the Super Bowl with them in like 02 or 03, whatever that year was. With how tough this division is, there are 3 good teams in this division. They're potentially probably getting 1 win maybe out of all those, probably 6 losses. So you start a season essentially looking at 6 losses, you're probably not going to make the playoffs. And so defense, I wrote down, there's nothing to report home about. Wide receivers are solid, but the rest of the offense is kind of bleak. They don't really have a running back. And then Jameis being suspended the first 4 games essentially puts a stake in the Buccaneers for this season. Sorry, Tampa Bay, but let's focus on that opener pitcher the Rays have. That's more important for you guys to watch.
Wow,
yeah.
man.
Or maybe USF or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, this team does not have the talent to overcome the loss of their starting quarterback, of a Jameis Winston. Like, they do have a good receiving core. Obviously, Mike Evans is one of the best receivers in the league. You still have the deep threat in Deshaun Jackson. You have a very, very good tight end in O.J. Howard.
Yes.
They drafted Ronald Jones II out of USC, a very, very
He's
kind of
disappointed
dynamic
in
running
camp,
back.
though, so far.
He's disappointed in the pass protection and the pass catching abilities. As a pure runner, I think he's very, very good, but he needs to become more of an all-around back. So they definitely have some holes on defense. They have Levante David. They still have McCoy up front, a defensive tackle. Their corners are good in Hargraves and Grimes, but they're both like 5'10", 5'11".
Well, Grimes is also really old, isn't he?
Yeah, he is. And it's like, I don't get how you can have 2 small corners on a team when you're going up against, receivers that are 6'2", 6'3". I mean, I know Grimes.
How does the Mike Evans thing in
athletic.
practice work out, right?
I don't understand it. I would
sense.
just throw the ball up to Mike Evans. He's got to catch it every single time, right? So, yeah, this defense is nowhere near good enough. And when you lose your starting quarterback for the first 4 games or 3 games of the season, that's going to put you, in a big hole that this team can't afford to have. So, unfortunately, I think this team will finish last again. I think if they end up with 5 wins again, they were 5-11 last year. If they end up with 5 wins again, I think that will be a very, very good year for them.
Oh, man,
I think they might have 3 or 4 wins, to be very honest.
Yeah, it's gonna be tough. Like I said, 6 losses more than likely. I'll give them 1 win against one of these teams, but it's gonna be tough for them. They're not making the playoffs. Fitzpatrick is a backup quarterback. He's okay, but there's just no chance. All right, so let's move on. Let's go to the Carolina Panthers next. This is another interesting team because this team is so reliant on Cam Newton. Yeah, exactly. I know you have him on your fantasy team.
That's right.
So that's
my man.
There's the bias from Jared coming in. You got the Cowboys in the first segment, and now Cam Newton. It's like, no, not really. But Cam Newton, pretty much this. If he stays healthy and he runs the ball effectively, I think the Panthers are a really good team. We saw that, and that's why they made the Super Bowl. If he doesn't stay healthy, this team is going to have trouble winning games and maybe return to the 16 form when they were like 5-11. So it's much reliant on Cam Newton. Christian McCaffrey is a great player. He's taking over the full reins at running back. No more Jonathan Stewart there
and
anymore.
Just very quickly, have you seen Christian McCaffrey bulk up this offseason?
No, I have not.
Like, I mean, I don't know what type of workout regimen he was doing.
He's jacked?
But he's jacked.
Oh,
like,
okay. He
came into
that.
the league as more of a scat back, a guy that can run outside. He is preparing to be the full-time back to run in and outside. I mean, look at a picture from before and after. The dude's huge.
I love it.
I just had to throw that out there.
Christian McCaffrey, the receivers are, ever since losing Kelvin Benjamin to essentially an ACL injury, the receivers haven't been the same. But defense also is getting depleted. Thomas Davis is suspended. Luke Kuechly has had a lot of dangerous injury scares the last couple of years. They've lost players. They lost two of their big defensive coaches to the Cardinals as well. So I don't know how good that defense is going to be. I would say this is the third team in this division for sure.
Really?
And I would say the Panthers, Cam Newton's got to ball out this year for them to make the playoffs.
He does have the ball out, and they do have a new offensive coordinator, Norv Turner, who has been probably with almost every NFL team throughout his coaching career, right?
Absolutely. He has a home in every city.
Right. The good thing about this is Norv Turner has worked with athletic quarterbacks like Cam Newton before. So if they can get Cam to, make easy reads, run the run-pass option with McCaffrey and some of the other running backs, C.J. Anderson, right? I think Cam can have a very, very successful year like he did when he led him to the Super Bowl a couple years ago.
Yeah.
This team will go where Cam goes. So I do agree with that. If Cam has a good year, I think this team has a chance to make the playoffs. If he has a down year and they, force him to be a drop-back quarterback, I don't think that will work at all. This defense, their front seven, I think, is very, very good. Obviously led by Luke Kuechly. Thomas Davis, that's going to hurt them a little bit with him being suspended for 4 games. But when he comes back, that will be one of the best linebacking cores in the NFL. You got K'Wan Short, Dontari Poe up front, Mario Addison. They have some good talent on the line. My concern with this defense is the secondary. I think they're very, very young. They drafted Dante Jackson out of LSU, who's a long, rangy cornerback, almost like a Richard Sherman type, but he's still a rookie. And you have James Bradbury at the other corner. Really, that's all they've got in the secondary. The rest of those guys, I don't think are playmakers or guys that can make as much of a difference. So, I mean, I think this Panthers team can end up first in the division or third.
Yeah,
It really goes on Cam Newton and how well he plays this season.
Yeah, they probably will end up being worse than the Buccaneers. Apologize to the Tampa Bay fans once again. But with the Falcons and Saints, who we're going to talk about in a second, having improved, really the Saints having improved last season, those games are going to be tough. And I just think it's going to be hard with the Panthers if Cam doesn't step up this season. Nothing didn't step up last year, but he just has to continue to do it. All right, let's move on to the Saints. The Saints, I said its offense is top-notch. Breeze, Kamara, and Michael Thomas, that's a great 3 running backs. They lose Ingram to suspension for the first 4 games, but I think their roster is...
I don't think that's a big deal.
It's built up enough to where you don't have the 2-headed running back, but he'll eventually come back. It's not like he's suspended the whole season or he tore his ACL or anything. So, if Breeze stays healthy, this team is dangerous. The defense... obviously is much improved from 2 years ago. It was one of the worst defenses 2 years ago. Now, last year it was great. A lot of great draft picks. I think this team is good. I think they have a chance to win the playoffs. I think they'll be right there to try to win this division if Drew Brees stays healthy. If he doesn't, this team is probably screwed, but that's essentially any team that has a star quarterback. So I'm going to say this Saints team wins the playoff. Don't know if they win the division, but I'm going to say they win the playoffs. I don't know if the defense will play as good as they did last year. I think they might got lucky and kind of stepped up, but we'll see.
Yeah, no, I think this defense is surprisingly good and led by Cam Jordan on the defensive line, who is underrated. I don't think the Saints get a whole lot of television coverage, but when you watch Cam Jordan, he's one of the best defensive ends in the league.
Yeah.
You have Defensive Rookie of the Year, Marcus Lattimore, holding down one corner spot. I think this defense can do enough, right? Listen, Drew Brees can go out and score 40 points in his sleep, okay? So all you got to do is not give up 40 points, and you're probably going to win. And I think this New Orleans Saints defense can do that. You mentioned the 2-headed monster of Kamara and Ingram, and obviously Ingram's going to be suspended. Like I said, I don't think that's going to be a huge deal because I think they're going to lean on Kamara a little more this season.
They have enough weapons behind
Right, and Michael Thomas. This team was 11-5 last year, and I'm hoping that they can use their loss last year in the playoffs as kind of fuel. They lost in kind of the most unbelievable way when they gave up that, not Hail Mary, but that long, like 60, 70-yard pass to Stephon Diggs for the game-winning touchdown in a sense. So hopefully they can use that as fuel and come back. This is a very, very talented team. This team can win the division. They can come in second and still make the playoffs. Like I mentioned at the beginning of this segment, last season, 3 teams in this division went to the playoffs.
Yeah, they could also end up in third place with a good average.
Right. I can see the same thing happening again because there are 3 talented teams in this division.
Yeah. No, it's going to be fun to watch. I like this division. This division is very fun to watch. A lot of loud stadiums, too. So it's fun thing to watch. But the Saints, like you mentioned, I always forget about that, and I think a lot of people do. They, easily could have been in the Super Bowl last year if it weren't for that Stephon Diggs catch.
Right.
They might have been able to beat the Eagles. So you might have been looking at Breeze, last year, you might have been looking at Breeze getting in the Super Bowl, beating Tom Brady, and retiring. But that doesn't happen, and they're coming back. So this team's good, and they are in some ways underrated going into this season. All right, last team, the Falcons. Jared, why don't you start with the Falcons?
Yeah, the Falcons are absolutely loaded. I think this team actually, on paper, has the best offense in the league. Obviously, you start with Matt Ryan, that quarterback. You have the freaking Julio Jones, who, in my opinion, is right there, kind of 1A, 1B, with Antonio Brown as the best receivers in the game. You have the two-headed monster, Devontae Freeman and Tevin Coleman. I think those two guys are fantastic together. You have Mohamed Sanu, who's been the team's number 2 receiver. And then you draft Calvin Ridley, with your first overall pick, who most people thought was the best receiver coming out of the draft. So, like I said, Matt Ryan has a plethora of weapons to throw to. There's no reason why this team should not offensively be able to score points. I think where this team can struggle a little bit is defensively. I don't think this defense is that good, to be honest. They do have some names. They've got Deion Jones, Trufant, Robert Alford, Vic Beasley. So they do have some names on this team, Keanu Neal, but I don't know if they will be able to stop teams enough. I think they give up too many points. They have too many mistakes, even when they're healthy. So I think this is the Achilles heel of this team. They made the playoffs last year because of their offense, and then they lost to the Eagles, basically, in the playoffs again.
They did beat the Rams.
They did beat the Rams, right? I don't trust the defense. I think that's my issue with them, right? Their offense is good enough. I don't trust the defense enough. So I think I'm going to have to give this division to the Saints. I would probably go Saints, Carolina, and then Atlanta. Okay. Basically just like last year. But also just like last year, I can see this team making the playoffs as a wild card.
Yeah, no, this is... I love this Falcons team. This team this year reminds me of the one... that they got to the Super Bowl with, and pretty much for winning the Super Bowl for 3.5 quarters, and then obviously blew it. Great offense, great offensive line. Defense, I'm going to have to disagree a little bit. I think they're better than you're giving them credit for. They have a lot of stars. They haven't lost a lot of guys either, so I think, barring major injuries to the best ones, they have the what you call, they have a great corner, they have a great linebacker, and they have a great pass rusher in Vic Beasley. So I like that tandem of a defense. Usually a defense is pretty good. My only thing that could affect the Falcons potentially is the Julio Jones contract. He might not play up to his standards because he might be thinking about his contract. That's the only thing. I'm going to disagree. I think the Falcons win this division. I think they get back into it. I think the Panthers are not as good as they were last year, and I could see them making the playoffs potentially, but I do not see them being better than the Saints and Falcons. And I just think this Falcons offense is so dynamic. They will win games on offense, and the defense is good enough to supplement that. So I'm going to give the division to the Falcons. You give it to the Saints. But both those teams, like I even said, the Saints could win it easily. So
right.
Should be interesting to watch. The NFC South might be my favorite division in football, to be honest, going into this year. All right, let's move on to the NFC West. Obviously, we had... one team come out of the division last year, and that one team was the Rams. The Rams. Well, let's start with the Rams because I think they're the clear best team in this division. Their roster is another team that's stacked. Okay, they added Aqib Talib, Marcus Peters, Ndamukong Suh,
Wow.
Brandon Cooks.
Wow.
Who else does that? Now, they don't have Aaron Donald right now because his contract situation is iffy. He pretty much said, I'm not playing football until I get a new contract, so he's not going to play. So this team, it's going to be interesting to watch them. They were, 13-3 last year or 12-4?
11-5.
11-5. Wow, okay, I thought they did better than that. But nonetheless, this team I think will be better this year. They're going to be one of the best teams in the NFC around up there with the Vikings. It's McVay's second season, so can he repeat the success of last year? You want to get Aaron Donald signed as quick as possible, too. I did hear that he's getting closer to signing. Not sure how healthy he'll be the first couple weeks or as far as his endurance goes, but to get him signed back is huge. My only thing that could affect this team is how good Jared Goff plays. Because I think he's the one thing on the offense that's not for sure. He's young. I think he's a product of Sean McVay's offensive system. But I think if teams have started to figure him out a little bit, he might be affected. But I think other than that, this team is the clear winner in the AFC East. I'm going to say it right now, they're going to win the division.
In the NFC West.
NFC West, excuse me, yes.
Yeah, no, I can't disagree with you with anything that you said. The amount of talent that this team added in the offseason just in signings, and then to add, they had 11 total draft picks, right?
Yeah.
So, they added so much more talent to a team that won the division last year. I think you're right. I think Jared Goff needed to be in more of a helpful offensive system, and that's where Sean McVay comes in. Obviously Sean McVay, a very, very bright-minded, young, I think he's either the youngest or one of the youngest head coaches in the NFL.
No, definitely.
Right, coming over from Washington. But he did a fantastic job with Jared Goff. Listen, for Jared Goff, if you ever get in trouble, hand the ball off to Todd Gurley.
Exactly,
That's
yeah.
all you need to do. If you're in trouble, I don't care if it's like 30
This is an all-star team.
Yeah, it really is an all-star team. And this is, I'm kind of going to, even though this team won the division last year and they're expected to repeat as division winners or at least contend for the division, on paper, I'm going to put them almost in the same category as the Giants as far as they have so much talent. Can they produce? Is it going to get to their head? Because they're not like a team that's going to sneak up on anybody anymore.
Yeah, that's true.
Everyone knows how good this team is. So they need to come out every single week and say, all right, guys, we can't take a game for granted, whether we're playing the Browns, the Bills, or the Patriots. It doesn't matter. No one's going to take this team lightly anymore. So I think because of the division that they're in, I think they have a better chance of, winning again and making the playoffs as far as winning the division. But yeah, it's going to have to come down to, can they, mentally stay in tune on a week-to-week basis with all the talent that they have?
Yeah, like I said, if teams can figure out Jared Goff, who I don't think is as good as Carson Wentz, who was drafted in that draft that same year, I think that's the one way teams could get the Rams and they end up 10-6 and 11-5 again or something like that. But other than that, I think if Jared Goff makes another step up, this team is scary. Because then they have weapons at every single spot on the offense and defense. So, very interesting. Rams, we agree, win the division. All right, 49ers, I think the next most interesting team in this division. Jimmy Garoppolo, his first full season as starting quarterback, undefeated as a backup so far in his career. I believe that was also with the Patriots, right? He's 7-0 in his career. So, very interesting. My thing with this team is, though, that's it, kind of. I mean, the defense is solid, but I think everyone is just on the Jimmy G bandwagon. There's not much other reason why they should win games. I just don't think they're going to make the playoffs this year. I think they're a little bit overrated. I think the defense is solid. They have a lot of the younger players keep moving up and keep making the steps forward. But on the offense, there's not many weapons besides Jimmy Garoppolo. They have Jerick McKinnon. He has some injury problems for the beginning of the season. Even the backup running back as well, Matt Breida, has been injured. So we don't know what's going to come out of that. Jared, do you see a way the 49ers can make the playoffs?
No, I do not.
Yeah.
I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. This team is very, very young, and they're talented, but they're inexperienced.
Yeah.
And I think they're...
Including Jimmy Garoppolo, by the way.
Right. They're a couple years away from contending. You have Pierre Garçon on the outside, who's a very consistent and reliable receiver, and I think he will be he's going to easily lead the team in receptions. They drafted Dante Pettis as a receiver/punt returner, so I think their special teams will improve in that aspect. I think he's a very, kind of multidimensional player who can do some things for them. On the defensive side, their defensive line is very, very stout. I think they're so young in the secondary, and they don't have any proven players. Obviously, losing Eric Reed because of the whole national anthem. We're not even going to get into that. But losing some veterans on the back end, I think, is going to really hurt this team in the long run. I think you will see them impress some weeks. I think they can look very, very good. And I think they're going to have some weeks where they just look inexperienced. So I think they will have a kind of roller coaster up and down season. They were 6-10 last year, and I see them going 5-11 or 6-10 again.
I agree with you.
Right?
Yeah.
Kind of teetering between that third and fourth spot in the division. So, like I said, 2-3 years from now, I think, if they continue to add talent, I do like Kyle Shanahan as their head coach along with John Lynch. I think it's a very good combination for this team. So give it a couple years, right? This isn't a bad team. They just lack playmaking ability all around. But give it a couple years. I think this will be a good team.
Yeah, no, this team's going to be good in the future, but like you mentioned, the NFC is hard, okay? You're not making the playoffs 7-9 this year in the NFC, or even 9-7. You got to win 10-11 games to make the playoffs, and I think that's what the 49ers are not going to do. So I don't believe they'll make the playoffs. All right, here's on the Cardinals. Obviously, this is where the bias is going to come up a little bit because I followed this team. I've even looked into them even more in this offseason than more last year. But Jared, I'll let you start with your take on the Cardinals.
This Cardinals team is another kind of gray area for me. I mean, you have David Johnson coming back, which is one of the biggest additions for this team because he's the do it everything running back, right?
Fantasy darling.
The offensive line, I think, is a weak spot for this team because of injury and just lack of talent. You lose the veteran Carson Palmer. You bring in Sam Bradford. Sam Bradford, if and when he can stay healthy, is a very, very good quarterback. The problem is he can never stay healthy. I don't remember the last time they just played a full 16-game season. You draft Josh Rosen with your first overall pick. He's dealing with somewhat of a thumb issue right now, but it doesn't seem to be too serious, and he could potentially even play in this last preseason game. So I think there's a lot of question marks surrounding this team. You've got Larry Fitzgerald, right? The old reliable, Mr. Consistent.
Absolutely.
On the defensive side of the ball, I think they're talented. You got Deion Buchanan. You obviously have Patrick Peterson holding down one side. My biggest question with this team, other than the quarterback spot, who is going to be the other corner opposite Patrick Peterson? I think they've been trying to figure that out for a couple years, and they haven't been able to find another solid guy. Because if I'm an offense going up against the Cardinals defense, I'm staying away from Patrick Peterson all game long, and I'm throwing to your second and your third corners because they haven't been able to show that they can consistently match up and stop people. So, like I said, I think this team kind of teeters around that same 8-8, 9-7 mark again. I don't think they will, exceed the the Rams as a division winner. I think they're kind of a couple pieces away. They're, like I said, another team that's not bad, but I think they're missing that, one or two guys that can get them over the hump.
Yeah, it's funny. I wrote down 4 items for each team, and you literally listed off everything I said. So we're thinking the same thing. The quarterback situation is interesting. Rosen has looked good in the preseason, but you never know when you get into the regular season how good a guy can be. Obviously, Sam Bradford, like you mentioned, great quarterback, but can he stay healthy? I think David Johnson being back there can help him stay healthy because he can just hand the ball off to him. Wide receiver core is very iffy, though. Following this team closely, it's Larry Fitzgerald, and then it's a big drop-off. It's Bryce Butler, it's Greg Little, it's all these random guys.
Greg Little hasn't played in the league in 2 years.
It looks good, but he hasn't played. Yeah, so that's definitely a spot where I'm looking in and I'm like, oh gosh, they're just going to key on David Johnson, and then maybe we got a couple great passes to Larry Fitzgerald, but our defense is going to have to kind of save games. The defense is good, though. There's not a lot of holes in the Cardinals' defense besides that one corner spot. I think Jamar Taylor, who they got from the Browns, is the best corner they've had since Cromartie. And they do have some good. They have Bené Ben-Wickery, one of my favorite names in the NFL. Former Panther, comes over with Steve Wilkes, the new head coach. He's a good backup and complement, so I think they actually do have some talent at the corner position this year. But it'll be interesting to see. Yeah, it's hard for me to say they're going to win more than 8-9 games, but they just have done that the last couple of years, and you don't know what you're going to get from the quarterbacks. I want to kind of look at their schedule and just see who they can win. I know they have a tough schedule. I know they play the Packers, Falcons, teams like that this year. So it's going to be, and I believe Minnesota as well. So
oh boy,
yeah, not good. But and then of course the Rams twice. So that's potentially 5 losses right there already. And then you see who else you can beat. But so. Cardinals will be interesting. I think they're the second best team in this division, but like I said, I think the Rams are the best one. I'm not gonna be biased to say they're gonna win the division or anything like that. I think you hit the nail on the head, pretty much exactly what you said, and I'll just go with that and continue. Let's go Seahawks and this segment of the show with the Seahawks. I love to see the Seahawks talked about as potentially the last place team in this division, which is what I think they're going to end up being. I just think
last place.
Yeah, it's going to be tough because. They've lost so much on defense. Sherman, Bennett, Chancellor, and probably Earl Thomas eventually. The offense is solid. They obviously have Russell Wilson, Doug Baldwin, Brandon Marshall. We'll see what comes out with him. They did draft Rashard Penny. But I just think that this team's culture isn't there anymore. I think that Legion of Boom is completely done. It's not there. The defense is a shell of itself, probably one of the worst in the NFC West. And I just think if this is not a successful year, this is probably Pete Carroll's last year with the Seahawks. I think that as well. But I'm gonna say they're gonna be around that 5-6 wins with the 49ers, and they're gonna be kind of like battling for last place in the NFC West.
You've been looking at my notes?
No, I have not. No, I not. I can't even see them.
This is my team this year that I think will start to really go on the decline.
Oh, no, I completely agree.
This team, 3-4 years ago when they had the Legion of Boom and they had Russell Wilson on his rookie contract and all these guys were, not getting paid boatloads of money yet, they were able to contend. Now that guys come up on their contracts and everyone wants to get paid, you can't keep everyone, right? So Cam Chancellor obviously is a neck injury, and that is so serious that he has basically had to retire from the game. You lose Richard Sherman to the rival 49ers. Let's see, Earl Thomas is a holdout, and it doesn't look like he's coming back anytime soon. He went and chased down the Cowboys head coach Jason Garrett last season and asked to be traded to the Cowboys. So he's from Texas. Who knows if that will happen or not. This is Russell Wilson, and that's it, right? They have Rashad Penny. He's been injured basically all
Doug Baldwin's a good receiver, though.
Doug Baldwin is a good receiver. This offensive line has been crappy for the last 3 or 4 years, and Russell Wilson has been running for his life ever since. He had a bad ankle injury for half of last season, and he wasn't really able to be the same guy that we know Russell Wilson to be. Hopefully he's healthy this year, and he is the only reason why this team will win. I don't see this defense really being good at all. They're definitely not the Legion of Boom or the kind of bona fide top-end defense that we have come to see this team be. And yeah, I don't know if they'll be as bad as the 49ers because I think Russell Wilson is a better quarterback than Jimmy Garoppolo, and I think he can get them an extra couple wins. And it's a tough place to play in that 12-man stadium. But yeah, I think this team is going to start to go on the decline. And last year was kind of their last opportunity to do something, and they didn't, going 9-7. So yeah, I think we both agree that the Seahawks and Russell Wilson are no good.
Yeah, music to my ears, by the way. They're the Giants or Eagles of the NFC East of the Cowboys to me. So,
yes, sir.
Nothing better to see the Seahawks not, and all those fans in Seattle be disappointed when their team continually loses at home next year. All right, so we're gonna move on. We're gonna take a little break in the NFL talk, at least the predictions talk, and do a little Do You Care on the other side of this break. So this is the Cover 2 podcast on OC Rock Radio.
Well, Cardinals Nation is celebrating tonight. There's a new manager at Busch. Mike Schilt has signed a 2-year contract, no longer the interim.
Urban Meyer suspended 3 games as boss. Athletic director Gene Smith will be suspended for about a half a month, starting on the final day of this month, going through mid-September. 60,000 pages of documents, thousands of text messages, 1 press conference.
Manu Ginobili announced his retirement from the Spurs yesterday, the last of the Spurs' big 3 to exit in San Antonio. A column for La Nacion in Argentina. Manu, he revealed he waited until yesterday to make his announcement so he could tell Greg Popovich first.
Welcome back to the Cover 2 podcast. Taking a break from the NFL for a second. Jerry, do you know what time it is?
What time is it, Nick?
It's time for Do You Care? It's time for Do You Care? This is the game. If you don't know how we play it, we play it as we ask the other guy, does he care about something? And if he cares or not, he explains why he cares or not, and that's the way the game is played. So we got 6 questions today. No NFL in this, so we're taking a break. So if you hate the NFL but you like our show, this is the segment to watch for the next 10-15 minutes, all right? Or listen to, excuse me. All right, Jared, first question. Do you care that the NBA is letting players wear whatever shoes they want now?
I do care. I think it's really cool for the NBA. Last year was the first year that Nike took over as the distributor for the jerseys for the NBA, and there was obviously a lot of different uniforms and colors and combinations. And I think what they see is a marketing opportunity and a way to make more money, not only for the players with their own shoes, but for the NBA and branding. So I think it's a good thing overall. You know, like, listen, if a guy wants to wear a different colored shoe, like, let him do it. It doesn't have to be a certain, time of the month or a time of the year when it's like, okay, you can only do it for this month, and then if you don't wear the right colors, you're going to get fined or something like that. First of all, the fines are like ridiculous because they're like $500 or $1,000, which to these guys is nothing. And second of all, I think it's good. I think it'll, fans might want to go out and buy a sneaker that maybe they didn't see before. And I think it'll just add more kind of fun to the game of basketball. Not that basketball isn't fun at all, but I think it just adds one more element for people to want to watch games. So I agree. I'm cool with it. Nick, do you care that Manu Ginobili has retired?
No, because I was kind of waiting for him to retire. The guy was a great player in the NBA. You people can debate whether he's a Hall of Famer or not. That's for someone else to debate. I don't follow basketball enough to debate Hall of Famers like in the lower ranks. But Manu, great career, obviously tons of championships with the Spurs. One of like the Spurs guys, but he's the last one. To be honest, I mean, there's not really any of the Spurs dudes left. Duncan's gone, Parker's gone, Ginobili's gone, and then of course Kawhi was traded. So their identity is gone. But Manu is older. I kind of was waiting for him to retire though, so do not care that much. But happy retirement for Manu Ginobili. Gonna miss his kind of wacky, crazy style he played with. Annoying if you're playing against him, but if you were a Spurs fan, you were cheering for him. Obviously fun to watch. But no, do not care that Manu Ginobili retired. Have a fun retirement. See you in Hawaii. Jared, do you care that USC and UCLA have announced their quarterbacks for this? Excuse me, USC has announced their quarterback. UCLA still undecided about their quarterbacks.
I do care. For USC, they have announced that true freshman JT Daniels, coming out of Mater Dei, will be their starting quarterback. It was a kind of a three-way competition. It was Max Brown, and I forget the other quarterback that was in it.
Yeah, I think it was Sears.
It was Sears, yes, yeah. I'm sorry. Sears, thank you very much. JT Daniels, he will be the first true freshman to start at USC since Matt Barkley did. So big shoes to fill for this kid, but Coach Clay Helton basically came out and said it wasn't just the fact that he has a big arm. It was the game management. It was how he played during the scrimmages, how he had such good composure for being an 18-year-old kid that sometimes you don't see with such a young athlete. So there's obviously a lot on this kid's plate, but I think USC is very, very talented. They come in ranked 15th to begin the year, but I think with the weapons that USC has, I don't think JT Daniels has to be, or has to make all the throws and make all the plays. I think he can be somewhat more of a game manager, get his feet wet starting out against UNLV, and kind of I think he'll just only grow from there. So UCLA, a little more undecided. They, like Nick mentioned during break, he told me, they are still undecided with three.
The three quarterbacks are Dorian Thompson-Robinson, Devon Monster, and Will Spate, the former Michigan quarterback. Those are the three guys.
Obviously, Chip Kelly taking over in his first year, and we all know what he did with Oregon and kind of making a name for himself there. So I'm going to be a little hesitant as far as to say he was going to make that same jump in his first year with UCLA. But I think this team can definitely be improved from last year. The only problem is whoever is starting at quarterback for this team, they will be without 6 of their players, as USC suspended 6 guys for their opener against Cincinnati for violation of team rules. So obviously not off to a great start for this program. but we'll see what will happen there. But I'm just excited that college football officially started last weekend, but really this week is when the majority of teams will be playing. This Saturday will be a full slate of college games, so very, very excited about that. Nick, do you care, sticking with college football, Urban Meyer has been suspended 3 games.
Yes, I do care, not because he was suspended, because of who he was suspended against. I forget exactly who the teams are, but they're not good teams. And this is Ohio State essentially doing the easiest punishment they possibly could have for Urban Meyer. They will more than likely win all 3 of the games that he was suspended for because the teams they play are not nearly as good as them. And conveniently, right when they get into the Big Ten's conference schedule, Urban Meyer is going to be back in coaching. So it's typical big college sports. They let Urban Meyer, get away with not murder, obviously, but they let him get away with enabling a coach to perform domestic violence against his wife. He did not fire the dude, Zach Smith, whatever his name is. This is more about, because obviously you probably know about the situation at this point, what's going on with Ohio State. It's more about just the fact that nothing is going to happen to Urban Meyer. And if this would have happened at Florida International University, that coach would have been fired the minute the scandal came out, or he would have been suspended the whole season. Urban Meyer is suspended until they need him, essentially. And it's not good for the game. It's not a good look for the NCAA, who won't even think about paying the players, or the conditions of some of the players is sketchy in college and stuff like that, and these student athletes have to work so hard, and they don't get so. It's not a good look for the NCAA, not a good look for Ohio State. It's not a good look for college football going into its first week. But hey, we'll deal with it, and then we'll talk about it probably in a month when Urban Meyer comes back for their first big game. But unfortunate that nothing big came out of this, and Urban Meyer essentially unpunished because of this whole situation. Jared, do you care? The St. Louis Cardinals are sticking with their interim head coach until 2020.
I don't care. I think this is a very, very good story and a good turnaround for a club that has not missed the playoffs in consecutive years since the early 90s, I believe. So the Cardinals, going into the All-Star break, were 46-47. They were, I believe, 7.5 or 8 games behind the Cubs. Since they removed the interim tag from their manager, is it Mike? How do you say his last name?
I'm going to go with Scheid.
Scheid, yeah. I wasn't totally sure, but I didn't want to butcher it, so I was going to let you do that.
It's close. It's a bad butcher.
If
you butcher it, might get kicked off the radio.
Yeah. So I'm going to let you get kicked off. But no, they've gone 27-12 since he has taken over, in a sense, as the manager, and they're now only 4 games behind the Cubs. So I think it's a fantastic turnaround for this team, and I think the Cubs will still win the division, but they're currently playing each other right now. They were rained out last night, so they'll have to make that up in a doubleheader at some point later on in the year. But it's a fantastic turnaround to go 27-12 with a new manager, and to be able to stay focused like that, I think is really, really good for that organization. Nick, last question for you. Do you care? Jose Bautista was traded to the Phillies.
No, not really. Because he was an okay, solid player for the Mets. Bautista is not the same star he was for the Toronto Blue Jays. It adds depth to the Philadelphia Phillies roster, which is gunning for a playoff berth. They are a good team. They aren't overrated this year. They have a legit chance to make the playoffs. And adding a veteran like Jose Bautista, who's been in those big playoff games for Toronto, it's a good addition. But he's just not the same player. So this is more of just a normal trade. To get Jose Bautista off the roster of the New York Mets and to get him on the roster of another team. And that's exactly what he did, getting traded to the Phillies. Do not care. But good luck to Bautista, because he's a fun player to watch when he's animated and he hits home runs and stuff like that. All right, going to get back to the NFL predictions. 2 more segments. Not one like normal. 2 more segments left in the show. We're going to be doing the AFC to finish off the show. This is the Cover 2 podcast on OC Rock radio.
But when you're talking about protecting his street value for the following year, there is no win in him going into a Pittsburgh situation where, frankly, if they think it's their last year with him, they're going to wear him out. They're just going to keep wearing him out. They're going to get whatever they want out of him. There's no win for Le'Veon in coming in earlier. I think if he wants to protect his value, he waits as long as possible, even though Steelers fans hate that.
It has been a while since we've started a season talking about what the Patriots don't have, but this year it's no secret they are light at wide receiver, mainly because Julian Edelman will miss the first 4 games for violating the league's performance-enhancing drug policy. Behind him, a very depleted group.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the show with our 3rd segment. We are continuing
4th segment,
with
actually.
the NFL talk. 4th segment.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Typically, it's the 3rd segment. We are already on our 4th, and we still have one more after this as well.
It's a good podcast.
Yeah, we finished up the entire NFC predictions, and we're moving on to the AFC now. We're going to start with the AFC East, and obviously, when you think of the AFC East, you have to think of the New England Patriots. They have completely dominated this division for over a decade, and Nick and I are about to tell you if either the Bills, Dolphins, or Jets have any chance at dethroning the New England Patriots. Nick, you can go first.
They don't.
No?
No, they don't.
Okay.
So it's the same, I almost said the same, as every other year. The New England Patriots are going to win this division. Now, the thing about the Patriots this year is it's a little different. Lots of controversy in the offseason. I don't know if this has been kind of media made, but all this controversy with Alex Guerrero and Bill Belichick and Tom Brady and all this stuff, it's uncharacteristic of the Patriots. So they'll be good this year. They'll get a lot of wins. They'll probably get at least 5 wins out of the 6 games they'll play against the rest of this division. You might see Jets or whatever upset them in a game, but most of the time they're going to get most of the wins. They're the clear best team. But we'll see if this relationship really is breaking up between Bill Belichick and Tom Brady. I don't know. It might have been media made, like I mentioned. Looking more at the team, they lose Danny Amendola. The defense is good, but is it great? Is it worthy of getting them back to the Super Bowl? But pretty much what you have to talk about with this team is, can they get to another Super Bowl? Because they're going to win their division. They're probably going to get a bye based on the fact that they just win most of their games. And can they get back to the Super Bowl? And I think this year we'll see, because this Belichick-Tom Brady thing, if it's real, I don't think they could. But we say this every year, and then the Patriots win 14 games, and then they get to the Super Bowl, and they either win or lose it like they did last year. So the Patriots will be a little more interesting this year, but they're obviously going to win this AFC East. I think there's no contest.
They will win the division. Things will be more interesting because it will not be won so easily. Mm-hmm. And that is for a couple different factors. Tom Brady's still fantastic, even though many people thought that by the time he turned 40, he would be kind of on the downhill, which obviously he is in his career. But Father Time has supposedly missed Brady, and he just continues to be
He's the LeBron James of
the most elite quarterback in NFL history. But this team is going through some losses and injuries. Their first-round pick, Isaiah Wynn, who was supposed to replace Nate Soldier, tore his ACL in Week 2 of the preseason. He's done for the year. You lose Danny Amendola. Julian Edelman is suspended for the first 4 games of the year, right? So right there, that's a lot of injuries. They do have a lot of good running backs: James White, Rex Burhead, Jeremy Hill, Sony Michel, their other rookie. I think he was banged up somewhat in the early part of preseason. So they have a good running back core, but their receivers, I mean, listen, Tom Brady can make anyone look good, but they don't really have anyone right now as far as the receiving goes. And Eric Decker, who they signed in the offseason, just retired last week. So, I mean, it's really going to be on Tom Brady to really, obviously, Rob Gronkowski is still there, and he is going to be Brady's main target, but he's going to get double and triple teamed every time. So Brady's going to have to find another way to get the ball spread around. How will this defense respond with Matt Patricia being gone now? This defense has never been known as a kind of, feisty, sack-heavy turnover team. They're more of a team that likes to just keep things in front of them. They're a bend but don't break defense, and they just want to get the ball back to Tom Brady. So we'll see if that continues. This team is going to win, like I said, because of the lack of competition in the division. But if the Patriots were in another division, say the NFC South or the NFC East or a tougher division, I'm not so sure they would actually win the division. I think they're going to make the playoffs regardless, but it's more or less lack thereof talent around the other.
Yeah, lose Malcolm Butler on defense as well.
Malcolm Butler as well.
But yeah, so I don't know if this team, like I said, I don't know if this team is nearly as good. And like you mentioned, those great things. They lose Decker, although they had him for a second. They lose Amendola. Hogan's the only guy, and they have Amendola out. So whatever their first games, I haven't checked their schedule yet, but their first couple of games, if they're playing a tough opponent or something, they might lose that game because they don't have a lot of talent right now. And like you mentioned, the defense is good, but it's not great. It's not like a Vikings defense or Rams defense. Explain. Give me who they're playing.
Week 1 versus the Texans.
Okay,
Tough
not
defense.
easy. Not
Tough
easy
defense.
at all.
Week 2 at the Jaguars.
Yeah, not
Another
easy at all.
tough
See, these
defense.
are both of those are losable games.
Yeah.
For the Patriots.
And then they've got the Lions and the Dolphins and the Colts. So those are, they can get back on track in week 3, 4, 5.
Well, you know what we say about this too? Remember the 1 year Tom Brady was suspended the 4 games and then they went like
11-5.
Yeah, and they went 3-1 in that thing. And
Right.
So they probably will end up, going 5-0 in that stretch. But nonetheless, it's going to be interesting for the Patriots. They're going to be good. Not much to say. We'll probably be talking about them during the season because of all this controversy stuff and all that stuff. But first 2 games are interesting. I'm glad they have some competition. All right. So, Jared, we'll do it this way because all 3 of these teams seem very similar to me, and it's hard for me to pick a team because I don't think any of these teams are going to make the playoffs. Who do you think is the second best team in this division?
It's a great question, Nick.
Yeah. Okay, you want me to go? You want me to go for it?
No. I'll give you a team, and I'm going to say it's the Jets.
Okay.
Right, I'm on the Sam Darnold bandwagon. I've been on it ever since he was at USC. He's gonna start.
Okay, I'm just saying.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
No, I think it's if he can stay healthy. I think he's going to start. He is the most talented quarterback that the Jets have. Teddy Bridgewater, it is a miracle that he has been able to come back from injury, and he's actually played pretty well this offseason. I think what can likely happen is, depending on whether it's before final roster cuts or sometime before the trade deadline in the middle of the year, I think this could be kind of trade bait for the Jets to have Teddy Bridgewater, and then if there's an injury to another team that needs a quarterback, maybe trade for Teddy Bridgewater or something like that. I think Josh McCown will stay as their primary backup. But I think Sam Darnold needs to play. He's the best opportunity that the Jets have to win. I think their defense is underrated. They got Jamal Adams, Leonard Williams, Darren Lee at linebacker. So I think they have a good young nucleus on defense that will be underrated. The problem is, who is Sam Darnold going to be throwing the ball to? Who are his running backs? And does he have enough playmakers on the outside to win games? I don't think he does. I think this team can win anywhere from 6 to 7 games. But I think as far as being the most competitive to the Patriots, I think that's the New York Jets.
I got you. That makes sense. Okay, that's similar to what I wrote down. I said Darnold could get them surprise wins, maybe a win against the Patriots. I said that I think the Patriots, I'm not going to ever guess the team's just going to sweep through a division because that's just hard for me to say. So you could see the Jets possibly being the Patriots. But, yeah, they're not getting to 500. And so I don't think the Jets are the second best team. They have a solid defense, like you mentioned, but not a good one. The offense is terrible besides Sam Darnold. And essentially, he's the only big part about this team. He's the biggest name, and they just got drafted, so that's never good. But so I actually think the second best team in this division is the Dolphins. I know Ryan Tannehill has always been a very average quarterback, but this team has an interesting wide receiver core. Obviously, they lost Jarvis Landry, but they still have Devontae Parker. They had Kenny Stills. Their running back tandem of Frank Gore and Kenyon Drake should be interesting. I think those are 2 very solid running backs. I think Tannehill will have a good year if he's healthy. And I just think this team is more talented overall than the Jets and the Bills. And I think they could get some wins for sure. And they won some games last year even without Tannehill. So I think with the addition of him, I think they'll be more in that 7-8 win range possibly. The AFC is not as good as the NFC, so AFC teams are going to get some wins, and it kind of affects their draft stock and stuff like that. But nonetheless, I think the Dolphins are the second best team. Jets are will be interesting because of Sam Darnold, but I think the Dolphins overall have the most talent on their team rather than the Patriots.
Yeah, that one's hard to argue for me. I do like the Dolphins' weapons. I think Kenyon Drake, coming out of Alabama a couple years ago,
great running back.
This is his first year that he's getting a chance to be the featured guy with Frank Gore being the kind of veteran. I think Kenyon Drake will surprise some people. Obviously, you've got Kenny Stills, Devontae Parker, like you mentioned, and you bring over Danny Amendola. Can Tannehill stay healthy? We haven't seen him do that consistently. I know we talk about health being a big part of this sport, but it really is. I mean, you lose the starting franchise quarterback, and things are probably going to go downhill. So if Tannehill can stay healthy and distribute the ball, then yes, the Dolphins are going to be able to put up points. The problem is on the defensive side of the ball, right? You lose Ndamukong Suh, the anchor of your defensive line, the guy that you gave $100 million to a couple years ago, and you don't really replace him at all. So I think that's going to be a huge issue for them as far as getting interior pressure on opposing quarterbacks. They do draft Minkah Fitzpatrick, the kind of do-it-all, everything safety / cornerback from Alabama. I think he's going to be a big addition to this team in the secondary, but I don't think their defense will be able to stop many opponents, or at least stop them enough in order to get wins. So, I think the Jets overall have a little bit of a better defense and can stop opponents more. So I think the Dolphins are actually the third team in this
defense
tier.
does win football games. I mean, we're debating about teams that probably aren't going to make the playoffs, so it's no point in even extending it. All right, so the Bills is the last team in this division. Do we believe both of them, or at least both of us, think they're going to be last place in this division?
They will. You lose Tyrod Taylor, who is a very underrated quarterback in my position now with the Cleveland Browns, who we'll get into a little bit later. What are they going to do at quarterback? A.J. McCarron went down last week and was thought to have basically a broken collarbone. That came back negative, and he just has a strain. So he should be good to go week 1, but will he actually be the starter? Josh Allen has kind of looked up and down. We all know that he has a ridiculously strong arm, but does he have the accuracy, the precision? Is he ready to take over an NFL offense? I'm not so sure. You got Kelvin Benjamin, LaShawn McCoy, Charles Clay. So you have some weapons on the offense, but I think overall, because of the lack of quarterback play, I think that's kind of what's going to hinder this Bills team overall.
Yeah, I mean, they essentially have no quarterback. I mean, Peterman was terrible in his one play. McCarron's never been a starter, and Josh Allen is unknown, of course, because he's a rookie. Defense is okay, is solid. Obviously, they got to the playoffs last year, so this defense, I don't believe they lost that much, so they're going to be good. LaShawn McCoy's not in his prime anymore, though, and he has some troubles off the field. Kelvin Benjamin is not the player everyone thought he was. And then, of course, with the lack of quarterback and the loss of Tyrod, it's going to be interesting. This is going to be a tough year for the Bills unless a quarterback surprises. Specifically more of like a McCarron or Allen comes out and ends up being a pretty good quarterback. But I see this team getting no more than 5 wins max this season. Patriots are the only team making the playoffs out of that division. For sure. All right, moving on to the AFC North. This is a division where I think the teams are better than, say, the AFC East. You, of course, have the Steelers, and then you have the Ravens and Bengals who've kind of been in between. And then you have the Browns, who I want to start with, because the Browns have had a crazy offseason. Obviously, trade for Tyrod Taylor, Jarvis Landry, they draft Baker Mayfield, Denzel Ward, and then they're on Hard Knocks. So this team will win some games. They're not going to be the 0-16 team or 1-15 team they've been the last 2 years. But I think once again, a lot like the 49ers, this team is overrated. Okay? They're probably not going to make the playoffs. They don't have enough talent for that. I think the biggest question for them this year is, will Baker Mayfield end up playing by the end of the season?
Yes, he will.
You think he will?
Oh, yeah.
You think he will? See, and that's where because Tyrod's a good quarterback, and Tyrod's kind of been disrespected the last couple of years. It's just they put Peterman in for him against the Chargers, and then all that, he threw 16 interceptions or whatever in the first half. And so, I don't know. I just think this team, they obviously have the potential of Josh Gordon coming back, who was one of the best receivers in the world at one point, but the guy just cannot get a handle on his life off the field. This team will be fun to watch, but I just don't. I think they're getting max 7 wins this season. I don't think they're a playoff team, and this division's not easy either. You have the Steelers, Ravens, Bengals are not a slouch either. So I don't even think in their division they're going to get more than 2 wins. So I think the Browns will be interesting, but I don't think they make the playoffs.
There's only one way that Baker Mayfield does not see game action this season, and that's if Tyrod Taylor keeps the Browns in playoff contention throughout the year. Because if Tyrod Taylor is playing well and the Browns somehow turn their 0-16 season around, and let's say they're 9-7 or 10-6, something like that, and they're in the hunt for the playoffs, then I think it's only right that Tyrod Taylor gets the opportunity to stay as a starting quarterback. But if the Browns, start the season well and then fizzle off, or just don't play well at all, I think, game 3, game 4, you already know what you're going to get out of Tyrod Taylor. I think you have to put that first-round pick out there in Baker Mayfield and see what he can do, right? Because this league is about winning right now. What can you do for me now? So to have your first overall pick sitting on the sidelines when your team is basically irrelevant, I think it's a bad decision. I think you need to see what that kid can do. So you mentioned all the additions that this team has. They're on Hard Knocks, all this stuff. They're getting a little more publicity. There's no way they're going 0-16 this year. I think they can get anywhere from 5 to 7 wins, which is a major improvement for this organization. And I think in the next couple of years,
seriously,
you will start to see them be more relevant. As for this year, I think they'll be middle of the pack at best. And I would say by middle of the season, we're going to see Baker Mayfield on the field.
It's interesting. It'll be fun to watch. I'm still surprised they drafted Baker Mayfield, only because they could have had Saquon Barkley and Tyrod Taylor and Jarvis Landry, and I think that would have been a pretty good tandem. Obviously, you want that quarterback. You could have had that a little further down the line. But if Baker ends up being great, you have Baker, and it doesn't really matter what Tyrod Taylor does. So that should be interesting. So we both believe Browns aren't making playoffs?
No, Browns are not making the playoffs.
Okay, so let's move on to the Bengals. And the Bengals, man, this team, I almost feel bad for their fans because this team has disappointed them so many times. I think this is the last chance for the Dalton experiment. I think if it doesn't work this year, you have to draft another guy. And I'm actually surprised they got rid of A.J. McCarron as well, because I thought he might have been a guy that potentially could have come in and been their quarterback, and he's gone now. So I think it's the last chance for him. The rest of the offense isn't actually that bad. You have Tyler Eifert, tight end. Joe Mixon now takes over the full reins of running back, and their wide receivers could be very interesting. You obviously have A.J. Green, who's an all-pro, and then they have guys like
Tyler Boyd,
and then John Ross. So their offense actually could be solid, but the problem is Andy Dalton's not a good quarterback. So you have these solid guys around him, and then you have Andy Dalton, who's just a subpar quarterback. I think if they had a good quarterback, this Bengals team could potentially be a playoff team. But I'm not going to say that right now. The defense, they need to change the thug mentality, okay, honestly, because they got rid of Pac-Man Jones, which was given. I think Burfict suspended, which I'm not surprised.
He is, I think, 2 or 3 games.
Yeah. So they need to get rid of that. They need to stop being this defense that gets a lot of penalties, is fighting all the time. That's great if you're a hockey team. It's not great if you're a football team. And we saw it a couple years ago against the Steelers when they literally lost that game because they couldn't stop hitting people in the head. So I think if this defense can fix that problem, because they're still talented somewhat, and the offense can somehow figure it out with Andy Dalton, this team could possibly make the playoffs, but I'm not going to say that for sure. And they need to fire damn Marvin Lewis. I mean, Jesus. Didn't he get an extension in the offseason too? So, I know if you're a Bengals fan, you need to be calling for Andy Dalton to go and Marvin Lewis to go before anything happens significant with this team.
There's 3 good things about this Bengals team. A.J. Green at wide receiver.
Yes.
And Geno Atkins and Carlos Dunlap on the defensive line, who both just got contract extensions yesterday. So congratulations to both of those players for getting long-term deals and getting locked down. That's about it as far as the good things I have to say. Joe Mixon is good, but I don't think he proved much of anything last year as far as being the feature guy. He's the feature guy this year because they don't really have anyone else. They lost Jeremy Hill. Giovanni Bernard is more of a scat back, and then they drafted Frank Walton from Miami, who's going to be their kind of 3rd, 4th guy, more of a special teams guy. But it's, I think, more by default that Joe Mixon is the starting running back as opposed to just his pure talent. I think this team, like you mentioned, their head coach is still Marvin Lewis, right?
Yeah.
And their starting quarterback is
It
still
always
Andy
will be
Dalton.
Marvin Lewis.
Right, and their starting quarterback is still Andy Dalton.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this team might make the playoffs by some luck of the draw. They're not going to do anything in the playoffs. This team, to me, is irrelevant. They need to get a whole new coaching staff.
They really
in there.
are. Nobody cares.
I'm done with Andy Dalton. He is way too inconsistent. You have one of the best receivers in the league, and you still manage to turn the ball over way too much. Tyler Eifert is a good tight end, but he is unfortunately been injury prone too much, and he is not a reliable, consistent threat. So this Bengals team, in my opinion, I think the Cleveland Browns could even beat them in the division.
It's only because of Andy Dalton and Marvin Lewis.
But guess what? What have they done? Yes, they went 7-9 last year. What have the Bengals done to prove to anyone that they should be relevant? I'm sorry, they haven't
didn't
done
add anybody.
They've done absolutely nothing, in my opinion. So I think the Cleveland Browns can be the third team in this division, and I can see the Bengals very easily being the last. That's just that's my opinion.
I
I'm
actually can
sorry.
see that too. I'm joking around. I can actually see that too. But yes, nonetheless, those are the two kind of lower teams in this division. Let's talk about the Ravens. I think the Ravens, I mean, they might be one of the more interesting teams going into this season because their defense is good. I think it's gotten better from last year. The team overall has improved, and they just missed the playoffs last season. Flacco's still a quarterback. He's good. He's a solid quarterback. And they drafted Lamar Jackson. I think if they could steal some games, they're a playoff team. I think they're that good. I think they could win 10 games, possibly even 11 if they steal some more games. And I think this Ravens team is a team that's going to be tough for a lot of teams to play. When you go play the Baltimore Ravens or they come into town, it's going to be a tough matchup. That's at least what I think.
They have the talent to win this division.
Yeah.
They won't, and I actually don't even have them making it into the playoffs. I think the Pittsburgh Steelers are the only team in this division that will make it to the playoffs. You're right, Joe Flacco has been the starter for forever now. And other than that one Super Bowl appearance where they did win against San Francisco 49ers, I feel that Joe Flacco needs players around him, both on the offensive and defensive side of the ball. I don't think that he is a guy that you can, kind of just put everyone on his back and say, hey, lead us to the promised land. I don't think that's him. He's had a lot of competition this offseason, obviously from Lamar Jackson, the highlight reel, next closest thing to Michael Vick. And RG3 has surprisingly had a good camp, right? After missing all of last season, not playing in the NFL last year. Problem for them, they did lose their starting tight end Hayden Hurst, who was their first-round pick to injury. I believe he's out for the year. You do add Michael Crabtree, Willie Snead, and John Brown, right, to kind of bolster that receiving core. But like I said, I think this all goes back to Joe Flacco, and I'm not sure that he can be the consistent quarterback threat that is going to scare defenses. I don't see it. So this is a good team that has talent, but I don't think they're going to be able to put it together. So I'm going with the Pittsburgh Steelers as the only team that will make it to the playoffs out of this division.
The Ravens are a higher class Bengals with the quarterback situation. You're right. Flacco is right in the middle. You talk about quarterbacks, he's in that like 20 to 16 range as quarterbacks. Maybe even a little bit lower. But if they had a better quarterback, this Ravens team would for sure be in the playoffs. I still think they'll make the playoffs. I think they have enough talent on defense to win some games. But yeah, it's never good when a backup quarterback is the highlight of your preseason.
Right. So, and Jimmy Smith, their starting cornerback, who was their first-round pick out of Colorado about 4 years ago, suspended the first 4 games of this season
that's tough. Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, they have guys that can step in for him, but not as bad as the Bengals, but they do have some issues there with suspensions.
Totally. All right, real quick, Steelers. I think we both believe they're going to win the AFC North. They are another one of the bell cows of this division, like the Patriots. Obviously, you have Le'Veon holding out, not even showing up till week 1. You have Big Ben, Antonio Brown still on the team. They lose, finally, Martavius Bryant after a couple of issues with him. Juju Smith-Schuster, obviously, a great player. The defense, I think, is good, even without Shazier. The thing is, though, which Le'Veon Bell is going to show up? Is it the one of the last couple years, or is it one that really doesn't care anymore because this season doesn't matter? It's just, for me, I think the Le'Veon Bell situation for them is going to be interesting, and I think it could cost him some games because the guy is not going to be healthy at the beginning of the season because I don't think he's been working out properly.
I am actually going to completely disagree with you.
Okay.
Le'Veon Bell was in this exact same situation last year because of his own choice. He is choosing to not be in camp and hold out because he wants a long-term
earlier
deal.
last season, though.
Le'Veon Bell had a fantastic year last year. He came, maybe the first game of the season he wasn't in the football shape that you expect, but he's still working out. It's not like he's sitting at home eating donuts all day, right? The guy's still working out, and he's going to come into camp right before the season starts, probably the beginning of next week. By Monday, he will be in and he will be working out. He is holding out because he wants a new deal. I also disagree with you. This is probably the most important year of his career because the Pittsburgh Steelers are not going to franchise tag Le'Veon Bell for a third consecutive year, just like the Washington Redskins did not franchise tag Kirk Cousins for a third consecutive year. So Le'Veon Bell knows that regardless of whether he gets a contract extension with the Steelers or whether he gets a new contract with another team, this is a year for him to come and show out. He has the weapons in Big Ben, Antonio Brown on the outside, right? You have a good, solid defense. They have all the pieces in place. So, no, I think this is one of the most important years for Bell. I think he's going to come out and he's going to be motivated. Hopefully, if he can stay healthy, I think he's kind of gotten his head straight on not smoking weed during the season, right? Knowing that he'll get random testing and all that stuff. But if he can stay healthy, I think he will be, back to his old form as one of the best running backs in the league.
Well, I mean, with the dynamic of Bell, Brown, and Big Ben, you're gonna win some games. And I think more of what I was trying to say is that Bell gonna want to win a Super Bowl for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and it's almost like I think it's a weird concept and it probably won't happen, but it's like, oh, these guys aren't gonna pay me money. Why should I come out and play for them as hard? I understand the thing about the contract, and he wants a big contract. I think he's going to get a big contract pretty much no matter what happens because he's literally one of the best running backs in the league. But it just should be interesting. I think it might affect the Steelers a little bit more. I think this team needs to win a Super Bowl soon because Big Ben ain't going to play the next 5 years, right? AB is going to have a new contract coming up, and they're probably going to lose Bell. So I think this is the year the Steelers need to put all hands on deck and try to win a Super Bowl this year.
Okay. Yeah, no, I think, listen, Le'Veon Bell is going to put everything aside. His main focus may not be winning a Super Bowl for Pittsburgh. His main focus is going to be winning and playing well for himself. And if he wins a Super Bowl, that's only going to give him more leverage as far as wanting a new contract for next year.
There you go. All right, so that's the AFC East, AFC North. We're going to finish it off with the rest of the AFC. That's the South and the West. On the other side of this break, this is the Cover 2 podcast on OC Rock Radio.
But yet I do think we can draw from last year's finish. We have for the most part, the same guys in the locker room. We've added some pieces here and there, and we know that's how we're capable of playing. And it just took us a little while to get there. And I think with the certainty now of where we are, where our facility is, where we're practicing, what the schedule's like, I think all that now is a non-issue, and we can just be football, 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 and focus on winning football games.
Deshaun Watson is one of the most incredible talents to come in the NFL in a long time. I think he's going to be the best quarterback. I think he's the future.
Before a torn ACL ended his season, Watson was a phenomenon, breaking Kurt Warner's NFL record for touchdown passes in a player's first 7 career games with 19.
Welcome back to the Cover 2 podcast final segment of the day, 5th segment. We have a rare 5th segment on the show today. Finishing up our NFL predictions podcast with the AFC South and AFC West. So let's go AFC South to start. Interesting division. You look at 5 years ago, and this division was one of the lower ones in the NFL. I think that now it's one of the better ones, to be honest. I think you have teams like the Jaguars and Titans, who made the playoffs last year, are improving every single year. Colts get Andrew Luck back. And then, of course, the Texans have Deshaun Watson. So this is a pretty good division. And it should be interesting to watch. Jared, which team do you want to start with in the AFC South?
I want to start with the Jags.
Okay.
The Jags are one of my favorite teams in the division. If I wasn't a Cowboys fan, I'd probably be a bandwagon Jaguars fan.
I think I would too. Yeah.
They're really fun to watch. They have a great defense. They remind me of the Seattle Seahawks a couple years ago when they had a lot of young players and guys that were still on their rookie contracts that they didn't have to pay. I think the problem with this team coming up in the next couple years will be what guys do they choose to keep and extend, and what guys are they willing to let go of. As of right now, they have a loaded roster, at least on defense. Went 10-6 last year, lost in the AFC Championship game to the Patriots. They whooped on the Steelers twice, once in the regular season and then once again in the playoffs, both of those games in Pittsburgh. And I think that really showed how legit this Jaguars team really is. Like I mentioned, the defense, Jalen Ramsey, Calais Campbell, A.J. Bouye, Telvin Smith, Miles Jack, Barry Church. They draft,
Just keep naming them.
I think Alan Branch, or another defensive lineman from Florida. You have Dante Fowler Jr. I mean, this defense literally from top to bottom is legit. Offensively is where the question marks come about, right? Blake Bortles, the game manager, can he not turn the ball over? He loses Marquise Lee, who had a very gruesome knee injury in the last week's preseason game. He's done for the year. You lose Allen Hurns and Allen Robinson.
Yeah.
So there's 3 receivers right there. 2 of them lost in free agency.
And that was the case right there where they weren't able to pay him because they know they're going to pay these defensive players.
Right.
So that's where it even has started, and that's why last year would have been great for them to win a Super Bowl because the roster is going to get a little bit depleted the next couple of years.
Oh yeah. So this is this team is a contending championship team based off of last year's performance. But, they're going to have to lean a whole lot on Leonard Fournette. The offensive line is going to have to protect Blake Bortles, and Blake Bortles is going to have to not turn the ball over. If they can do that, their defense will keep them in every single game. You can almost book it, right? Can the offense score enough points to get them back to that 10-11 win mark? Because, like you said, the Tennessee Titans made the playoffs last year. They only got better. Andrew Luck is coming back for the Colts, and the Texans with Deshaun Watson, before he got injured, looked really, really scary. So, a very, very good division, like you mentioned.
Yeah, no, the Jags, the defense is outstanding. It's along the lines of the Rams and the Vikings and all these defenses I've already mentioned, stuff like that. Bortles, the quarterback, the offense is led, at least in my part, by Leonard Fournette. He's the best player on the offense, in my opinion. Their receivers are non-existent now. It's a bunch of random dudes. It's Kalen Cole, it's Dede Westbrook, it's a lot of guys, a lot of people haven't heard of. Guys like my dad have not heard of any of these receivers on this team. So that's going to be tough. And like you mentioned, tough division. They're going to be playing, I believe, a first-place schedule this year as well.
Yes, they will.
So that's even not. Now you're playing you're playing the Patriots. You're playing the was it Chiefs that won the one that you're playing the Chiefs. So you're playing all those kind of teams too. A lot of people don't know that the Steelers as well. So you're getting a lot of tough games. But the defense will keep them in games. But I think this is one of those teams where it wouldn't surprise me if they didn't make the playoffs only because their offense is just not very good. And it reminds me of some of those Denver Broncos offenses. Although they won the Super Bowl one of the years, they also got obliterated and smacked in the Super Bowl one year and stuff like that. So it'll be interesting. Jaguars will be in that playoff hunt for sure, though. Let's move on to the Texans. You mentioned the Texans. Deshaun Watson's back. J.J. Watt is back, although it seems like J.J. Watt is back every single year because he gets hurt every single year. So we say that, but nonetheless, defense is still good. They add the Honey Badger, who I haven't been that high on, but he's not a bad player. Jadeveon Clowney is still on that defense. But really, for me, it's what can Watson do for you? Okay? Because if Watson's healthy, they looked great. If Watson wasn't healthy, they looked like the same old Texans that have no offense and Tom Savage is their quarterback. So, and you mentioned this is a tough division. It's going to be tough to beat the Jags twice. It's going to be tough to beat the Titans twice. And it's going to be, probably to be honest, tough to beat the Colts twice. So, this will be interesting. The Texans are one of these teams we mentioned, like the Cardinals and the Lions and the Packers, all these teams that they're going to be around that 9-win range. Can they take the extra step forward and get extra wins and make the playoffs? I actually personally think they could. I think the Texans have a very good chance at winning this AFC South because I think Deshaun Watson is the real deal.
Deshaun Watson stays healthy, the Texans win this division. I think the Texans and the Jaguars.
Defense is good enough.
Yes,
yeah.
We'll make the playoffs. You mentioned Tyrann Mathieu. They also got Aaron Colvin, a very, very good slot corner from Jacksonville to come over to kind of bolster that secondary.
They also have on offense too DeAndre Hopkins as well, which everyone seems to forget every single year.
Watson to Hopkins was one of the best quarterback to wide receiver tandems in the league last year before Watson got injured. Obviously J.J. Watt's back, Jadeveon Clowney. The defense is stacked. The offense is really good. The offensive line and the running backs are probably the two question marks that I have as far as the offense goes. but I think Deshaun Watson can, overcome that, and I think this team has all the makings to not only win the division but contend in the playoffs for a Super Bowl.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah,
so
yeah. No, I think this team is very, very loaded, very talented. But listen, a lot of players on this team have bad injury histories, right? Coming off ACLs or bad knee or shoulder injuries. So if they can stay healthy, yes, this team has the makings of contending. But that's a big if for a team with a lot of injuries in its past.
Exactly. I think we both agree on that. I think there are favorites to win the AFC South. Let's look at the Titans. Another playoff team last year, and they actually beat the Chiefs, which was pretty crazy, and then ran into the buzzsaw of the New England Patriots, which is never fun to do. But this team, the defense is solid, and they add Malcolm Butler to complement Logan Ryan, a great cornerback tandem there. They have new head coach Mike Vrabel, who is defensive-minded, so I think this defense will improve. They'll be very good.
Comes over from Houston.
Exactly. And the offense is still very solid. They have Corey Davis, Delaney Walker, and, of course, Mariota. And I think this is one of those teams, Mariota is the key to the offense because Mariota is an up-and-coming quarterback. He's an interesting running quarterback. He reminds me a lot of Deshaun Watson. Now, Deshaun Watson really should remind you of a lot of Mariota since he's younger, but Mariota, I just don't think is that good. It's the same kind of guy. I think this team is good, and they have a good chance of making the playoffs, but this division is tough, and they could catch some losses from the Jaguars and Texans and Colts, and maybe that makes them not make the playoffs. So I think the difficulty of this division is why it was hard for me to pick a division winner, and I went with the Texans just because I think they have the most talent. But this Titans team could also win the division very easily.
Very underrated team.
Yeah. Oh, extremely.
They are a nasty football team, in my opinion. An old school football team. They built their team from the offensive, defensive lines back. Obviously, you need to have a quarterback. You need to have a good shutdown corner, which I think they do in Adoree Jackson. I think he's going to take that next step. Even though they did get Malcolm Butler, I think Adoree Jackson will finish the year as their number one cornerback. But they run the ball. They got the big bruising Derrick Henry. They signed Dion Lewis, the kind of lightning scout back, right? Yeah. So last year with DeMarco Murray and Derrick Henry, they had the Thunder and Thunder. Now with Dion Lewis coming into the fold, you got a little Thunder and Lightning. Kind of mix it up a little bit. You mentioned Corey Davis. Hopefully he can be the first-round talent that this team has been expecting from the last couple of years. Delaney Walker, a very underrated, very, very good tight end for this team. And on defense, I think I say underrated a lot, but this team defensively I think is underrated. Jarrell Casey, coming out of USC, I think he's been in the league for like 6 or 7 years now, is probably one of the best defensive tackles that no one talks about.
Oh, seriously?
No one talks about him because Tennessee doesn't really get into the national spotlight that much, but he is a very, very disruptive player for them. And yeah, I think this team can be sneaky good. Unfortunately, when you're running up, with the Texans and the Jaguars, I think it's going to be tough. I could see this as a division where 3 teams make it in the playoffs.
Potentially.
Obviously, the Titans and another team would have to go in as the wild card. But I could see that because I think this team has too much talent to not be relevant. But we will see. Moving on to the Colts to finish up this segment before we move on to the AFC West. They get Andrew Luck back. And that is obviously the number one and biggest story for this team so far in all of camp. Finally, Andrew Luck seems to be healthy from that shoulder. He basically has missed the last 2 years, and the Colts have been completely irrelevant whatsoever. So with Andrew Luck back for now, hopefully he can, stay healthy for the season. How well, how good is he going to be? Is he going to be the Andrew Luck of old, or is he going to be a little hesitant because of that shoulder? He, in my opinion, has to be MVP caliber for this Colts team to do anything, because I think this is one of the least talented teams in all of the NFL. You draft Quentin Nelson, who I think can, be
very good choice. We were calling for them to do that the whole time.
Right. To finally solidify that offensive line to protect Andrew Luck. You have T.Y. Hilton, and that's about it on offense, right? I can't really say much more. Defensively, they have a new defensive coordinator that's switching from a 3-4 to a 4-3, so that's going to take some time to adjust. And I think this team does not have the talent to keep up with the other 3 teams in the AFC.
No. Besides Luck, Nelson, and Hilton, this team is awful. This reminds me a lot of the Jets, but I think the Jets have such a good defense. It's a way easier comparison. Offensive line is still not good. I think they just want. I swear, the upper management in the Indianapolis Colts has like a vendetta against Andrew Luck. They want him to get sacked. It's just what it seems like it is. The defense is not good, and Luck is literally their only chance. You said he has to play like an MVP. I think even if he plays like an MVP, this team ain't win more than 7 games. So, and in this type of division, man, maybe they could steal a couple games some of these teams because of Andrew Luck, but it is going to be a tough road. I see no way this team makes the playoffs even with Andrew Luck, unless they make some big trades or something for offensive players. But I think it's clearly Texans, Jaguars, Titans. They all have a chance to win the division. They all have a chance to make the playoffs, and the Colts are right there. All right, let's move on to the AFC West. Last teams we need to talk about. There's 4 of them, like every other division. And let's start with the Raiders, Jared. Because the Raiders are an interesting team. One of the more interesting ones of the offseason. Obviously, John Gruden. John Gruden, the new head coach. How will that work? We don't really know. Carr's still the quarterback, which means the team has a chance to be good. They add Jordy Nelson and Martavius Bryant to the wide receiver core, along with, I believe, Crabtree's gone, right?
Crabtree's
gone.
But they still have Amari Cooper.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the defense is solid, and they have a good offensive line. Jared, what do you see from this Raiders team? How is this team going to get back to the playoffs?
They get back to the playoffs with their offense, because I'm going to completely disagree with you. I think this defense is awful. I don't think this defense is really good at all.
Awful?
And the fact that,
So you're comparing them to the Colts defense
You might as well.
Oh, man.
I'm sorry, but I don't think
tough.
they have really any weapons on offense. And your best player... I'm sorry, on defense. And your best player in Khalil Mack, the all-pro at 2 different positions, is holding out. And it doesn't seem like there's any end in sight. This man has already given up almost $2 million in money that he, since he has not shown up to team activities and missed the first 3 preseason games. So he's obviously said that, by giving up that $2 million, that he's willing to hold out. And that's going to go into the regular season.
Geno Atkins and Carlos Dunlap getting contracts has affected Donald and Khalil Mack as well.
Right.
So they're going to want more money now, too.
Right. I don't see this team... I mean, there's 2 other defensive players on this team that I recognize, in Carl Joseph, the strong safety, and Bruce Irvin, the other defensive end opposite of Khalil Mack. Other than that, I'm sorry to say, I don't trust this defense at all. This offense is going to have to come out and be the reason that this team wins, which it can do. Like you mentioned, all the new additions to the receiving core. I think Jared Cook is a very underrated tight end for this team.
They still got Marshawn Lynch.
They still have Marshawn Lynch, the bruiser. They have a really good offensive line. So offensively, they can score points, and it will keep them in games. I don't trust that their defense will be able to stop anyone. I think this team is 3rd or 4th in the division, and I don't see them making the playoffs.
Okay. Interesting enough. I don't see them making the playoffs either, because I don't know what's going to come from Gruden. Hey, maybe Gruden makes the defense step up. Maybe Gruden is this unbelievable coach again, but I'm not going to sit here and say that they're going to make the playoffs. Let's move to the Denver Broncos. Case Keenum is the new quarterback. They finally have a quarterback since they lost Peyton Manning. The defense is still very good. Not Super Bowl caliber like it was a couple years ago, but it's still very good. Not much running back depth. The wide receiver core is pretty much the same as it's been the last couple years. And finally, with a quarterback, how far can this team go? Because last year they were in draft pick range. They were looking at draft pick. But with Case Keenum in this defense, and they do have a new running back. I believe it's Freeman.
Royce Freeman.
Yep. So I think this team could potentially make the playoffs, but a lot of things are going to have to go right. And I just think it's hard for me to say because their offensive line isn't that good either. And I think anytime you have a good defense, you have a chance. But it's going to be tough. But it's if you're a Broncos fan, it's better watching Case Keenum than the guys they had the last couple of years.
Oh, it is, of course. Paxton Lynch, Trevor Siemian did not get the job done.
Terrible.
Case Keenum is still kind of a wild card in my opinion. Obviously, he had the breakout year of his life last year with the Minnesota Vikings after being pretty much a backup quarterback for most of his career. And I think he's kind of in the situation that Nick Foles is in, as to where he's a lower-end starting quarterback, but I think better suited as a backup quarterback. Does he, will he be able to have the same success that he did last year in Minnesota? I think his receiving core is upgraded. I think his offensive line is not as good as in Minnesota, and I don't think he has as good of running backs as he did in Minnesota. So, 1 plus and 2 negatives, I think it's going to be on him, his arm. Is he going to be able to complete passes to Emmanuel Sanders and
Demaryius Thomas.
Demaryius Thomas. I'm sorry for blanking on his name. I think he will be able to. This defense, they kind of came up on a gem, right? I didn't think that Bradley Chubb was going to be there at number 5, and he was. And obviously, to pair him with Von Miller, that is a nasty defensive front, right? You still have Derek Wolfe. You have a really, really good linebacking core. You have Bradley Roby at one of the corners. You have Chris Harris Jr. there. You lose Aqib Talib, but I think that the corners can be replaced. My issue with this team is at safety. I think they're very young and inexperienced at the safety position. So I don't think this defense will be the Super Bowl defense it was a couple years ago, but I still think they'll be very, very good. I think this division is too tough for the Broncos to compete this year. I think this team is a year or two away from contending with Kansas City and the Chargers and even Oakland. But it's a tough division, and unfortunately, I think the Broncos are kind of looking out.
The tough division part might be a reason why they don't make the playoffs as well. All right, let's move on to the Kansas City Chiefs, the division winner from last season. Obviously, they have a new quarterback in Pat Mahomes. The second guy I heard the other day could throw 85 yards from one end zone to the other, which is impressive.
I believe it.
Yeah, no, he has an incredible arm. They add Sammy Watkins, and it's also Kareem Hunt's second season. They also have Tyreek Hill. And I said that I wrote this down. The Mahomes to Hill connection could be extremely fun to watch.
Did you see the second preseason game?
Yeah, no, I did.
In Atlanta, where Mahomes was literally about to get creamed by a defensive end, and he threw the ball up like 60 yards to Tyreek Hill who beat all the defenders.
He's very talented. Can that work in the regular season? I don't know. Tyreek Hill is that fast. But they have a lot of offensive weapons. The defense is still solid. They get Eric Berry back. I know he had injury troubles last year. They have a lot of their solid guys. So this is a team that I believe will make the playoffs. I don't know if they can win the division only because I think there's one more team that's better than them in this division. But this team is very, very good, and they're going to be in that playoff race the whole year.
They are good. It was Tyreek Hill came out earlier this week in an interview and said that this Kansas City Chiefs team will have the number 1 rated offense in the league. And it's kind of tough to argue when you really think about it.
We don't really know what's going to happen with Mahomes.
Right.
And that's another reason why I didn't want to pick them to win the division, because I'm not going to pick essentially a rookie quarterback to win a division.
Right.
But if this guy is as good as they say he is and as good as he's shown in the preseason, man, they're going to be good.
They will be good. It is still a little surprising to me. They had 5 draft picks in this draft, and they spent them all on defense. So I think that right there, that tells you, they're like, hey, listen, we're good on offense.
Yeah.
We trust Patrick Mahomes. We have good receiving threats. We have a great running back and a good offensive line. We don't need to improve that area. So for them, they get Anthony Hitchens, a linebacker from Dallas, who I know a lot about, and I think is very, very good. A very kind of tough guy as well, plays through injury, so he should be there to anchor the middle of that defense. Eric Berry comes back from an Achilles injury, one of the better safeties in the league, and hopefully he can stay healthy this year. They obviously traded Marcus Peters, who we already talked about, to the Rams, but in trading away Alex Smith, they got Kendall Fuller, who's a really, really good slot corner from Washington. So you lose Marcus Peters, an outside corner, you gain Kendall Fuller, an inside kind of slot corner. So I think the defense will be legit. And offensively, if Tyreek Hill is anywhere close to being right, this team can be very, very explosive.
Yeah, exactly. No, we both agree. They're going to make the playoffs. They could win the division. But, I'll say this because I prefaced this right before, I believe the Los Angeles Chargers are winning this division in the AFC West. And the reason is, you look at this team, from top to bottom, the only issues they have is they have no tight end depth, only because they've had horrible injuries to their tight ends. And the kicking game is sketchy. This team should have made the playoffs last year. If it weren't for their kickers just botching kicks at the end of games, something a coach really can't do anything about, and the rest of your team can't do anything about, they were in the playoffs. And they were potentially a Super Bowl team last year. So this team is going to be good. They're going to win 10 to 11 games or more. They need to figure out tight end. I pretty much said no tight end depth until they sign Antonio Gates back. Because that dude has he retired? I don't believe so. So
No, he's still a free agent.
Yeah, so he should come back. I mean, there's one team that wants him, and they have nobody at tight end. Sign the guy back. I get he's old and all that stuff, but you have nobody. The rest of the offense is very talented. Keenan Allen, Melvin Gordon, Phillip Rivers, and a complement of a lot of other receivers, including Mike Williams. Defense, especially defensive line, Melvin Ingram and Joey Bosa, 2 of the best.
Loaded.
Yeah, and so this team is very good. That's why I think they are going to win the division, and I'm going to pick them over the Chiefs only because of Pat Mahomes being quarterback.
Yeah, no, this team, if healthy, should win the division.
Both these teams are making the playoffs.
The injury bug hits them so hard, like you mentioned already. Jason Barrett, Hunter Henry, gone. They do draft Derwin James, who was one of my favorite, not only safeties, but players coming out of this draft. And he isn't even starting for this team. They have really, really good safety depth.
That's what I'm saying.
I think what they're going to do somewhat like the Patriots do, when offensive teams go into their 3 and 4 wide receiver sets, the Patriots play with 3 safeties, guys that can come up and hit you but can also cover. And I think that's something that the Chargers might do as well, is add Derwin James as that 3rd safety, guy that can kind of roam around anywhere on the field. He can cover slot receivers, tight ends. He can come up and hit you in the run game. So I think he's a do-it-all safety. And it's kind of just piggybacking off of what you said. This team has the makings of being a Super Bowl contender, right? We say that a lot. Can Phillip Rivers get it done? I think this is on Phillip Rivers' shoulders, right? He does lose some of his weapons, but he still has a good receiving core and a good running back in Melvin Gordon. I think this is on Phillip Rivers. I think if this team stays healthy and they don't win, it's going to be Phillip Rivers' fault, right? And this is a team game, right? So it's tough to just point out one person and say, this person didn't play well enough,
last year
right?
You could have said the kickers was the reason.
Singularly,
that's the reason.
I think Phillip Rivers, with the amount of time that he's been in this league, I really think it's on him now to win. He doesn't have that many years left. You can't say that he doesn't have talent surrounding him. And if they do not succeed, I think you have to say it's because of him.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I think both the Chiefs and Chargers are making the playoffs, though, for sure. Book them. Barring major injuries to, say, a Phillip Rivers or maybe a Melvin Gordon or someone like that, or Joey Bosa, people like that, and then for the Chiefs, many other injuries. But, yeah, should be fun and interesting. All right, well, that makes it come to an end of our NFL season prediction show. Real quick, we wanted to mention that during our podcast, Aaron Rodgers has been signed to the biggest deal in NFL history. We will talk about that more than likely more on the next podcast. Just to preview the next podcast, because it doesn't get any worse after this. We're going to give you our full, what we really think is going to make the playoffs. Our 6 teams from each conference to make the playoffs. We'll make Super Bowl picks. We'll make MVP picks and stuff like that. We'll talk about Aaron Rodgers. And then we're going to have the RKJ man, Ryan Johnson, in the studio next week. He's part of a podcast I do called the Ring Generals Podcast. He's coming in. He's a huge Panthers fan. He wants to debate Jared. He doesn't want to debate me because he thinks he has no debate against the Cardinals, so he's just going after Jared.
Let's go.
So it should be interesting. Any last words for the RKJ man right before we go on next week?
You better have his facts ready. That's all I got to say.
I got you.
Because if he comes in here thinking he's just going to talk off of his own opinion and everything, I'm going to squash him in the first 5 seconds. So you better come prepared.
I got trust in you, too. You know your football. I've been telling him that, too. So should be interesting. We got that. We got NFL coverage. We got college football. We'll be talking about the first week of college football, too. So Giants show next week. As well. There you go. You hear the music. Now it's officially the end of the podcast. Jared, always fun doing the NFL Predictions podcast. Now you kind of know what, if you didn't know a lot about football and you listen to our show a lot, now you know a lot about every single team. And we'll give our full predictions of the playoffs next week, like I mentioned. For Nick Nina,
I'm Jared Smith.
And this has been the Cover 2 Podcast.